Daniel, for all of the enormity of the US military, can the US actually concurrently do Iran, do what it's doing in the Caribbean, deter China, reinvigorate itself with all of the new technology that it's trying to bring into the force? Um, it feels to me that although the US is undoubtedly enormous and brilliant and by far the planet's greatest military, there's a limit on what can be done, and it feels to me that Trump is getting close to a sort of to too much at one time.
Yeah, I can tell you categorically the answer is no. Just, I don't, it's not, I'm not going to beat around the bush. Definitely no. The problem is that President Trump says what virtually every president says, except he says it with more vigor, and the Secretary of Defense echoes it, that we are the greatest military power, not just on the earth, but in the history of the earth. And he then views, and this is why it's so dangerous, that there's nothing that we can't do. We can literally do everything. And he keeps pointing to the operation in Venezuela as proof that we are this incredible military power, when what we actually did was, with significant inside help, conducted about a 2-hour operation to snatch and grab one individual and left, and you had this massive force to get it done. So I guess it's good on the surface of it, but now then we're finding out subsequently it wasn't all as amazing as it was talked about. But at the bottom of the line, it was one day against a very weak power. And if you think that that's going to translate into anything in China or Russia or North Korea or even Iran, you are sadly, sadly mistaken, which I fear the president and the Secretary of Defense are. And I can just tell you, if we get bogged down in Iran, for example, then it's going to be evident that it's not that way. Meaning that if Iran does what so far no one else has been willing to do, and says, you know what, I don't care how big the power imbalance is and how far down we are, we're going to fight. We're not going to just buckle again. And all of a sudden we get into a war. And I'm telling you, unless you put like 500,000 troops on the ground, you can't bomb your way to victory there. You can bomb a lot of stuff and you can kill people and you can break stuff. But if you get into a sustained war, and that's the key, we don't have the industrial capacity or the manpower to actually engage in a sustained conflict. It would have to be a massive change. And then that would put at risk everything else in the world where we have troops. And listen, I don't believe that we are the best military on the planet right now. I think that is Russia, because of all the experience that they've had, all the time that they have been learning through blood and loss, etc. And I think the very next one is Ukraine military. And I might even put the Chinese in third place, because they have also been paying a lot more attention here and making a lot more changes, and especially regionally. They're not a global power, they're a regional power. And if we try to go into their front yard and fight, we'll find out just how big that power imbalance is. So a little soberness and in wisdom to say, hey, we're very powerful. We could send power all over the globe. That we can do better than anybody. But once you get there, we don't have the sustainability to win a war in those places. And I think some people are not aware of the difference between those two.
The person who wins in all of this is Xi. I think the Chinese probably can't quite believe their luck that they've got a US president sowing chaos all over the world, that in a way that is fracturing the Western alliance, fracturing a rules-based international order. Those are the two grand strategic aims for China, and Trump is delivering them for him. And it just, whilst concurrently Putin's main aim was to see himself restored to the world's top table, back in the G7, back as one of the kind of people that decides the fate of the world, which again, Trump is handing him on a plate with things like this membership of the Peace Board, and proposing in the original suggested peace deal for Ukraine that Russia be readmitted to the G7. Um, it is, it just feels that for all that I'm sure he is in his mind executing America's priorities and delivering on the American will, but it seems to me that the people who are really benefiting are Putin and Xi.
So Trump may, in his mind, believe that he's doing things for America first, but his actions are just irrational. And I'm not the only one that believes this, believe me. I've actually talked to some diplomatic friends of the United States here in Washington, D.C. recently, and they actually believe that he is I mean, one of us said it, his actions are just insane, and we think maybe he is. And so they are doing what I think what you mentioned earlier here, that they're saying, let's just try to ride this out. Let's just try to not upset him. These are allies. Let's try to not upset him, but look to whatever may come next, because we can't challenge him because that could go bad. But we have to also try and not get sucked into something bad. So I think that that could be the most logical explanation for these irrational actions, is that there really is something wrong. And man, that opens up a whole new can of worms. How do you handle that? Especially when all the people around him are incredibly supportive of everything that he does and justify every of these, what we may consider irrational actions, and they double down on them. So there's any idea that the inner circle is going to recognize that he's an impairment to do something seems to be not very likely.
So it's interesting. Mark Milley, when he was chairman of the Joint Chiefs, won the opprobrium of all of the MAGA base, when over decisions that he took on the 5th of January at the end of Trump's first term, um, because he felt that he needed to honor the Constitution, not necessarily the immediate direction of the outgoing president. Um, I wonder if Dan Kane, the current chairman of the Joint Chiefs, when he's not busily planning the invasion of Canada, when he, whether he starts to sort of think that he might need to make a similar intervention.
I don't know much about him at all. I don't have any personal contacts or anybody that I know does. All I can say is that what I've seen him do and some of the statements he's made when he's been on the podium next to the president don't give me much confidence that he's one that might do that. I mean, President Trump specifically selected him as the chairman because of his perceived loyalty. So I don't put a lot of hope in that.
That is deeply deeply worrying, because you would think that that is, the first informal opportunity for the head of the professional head of the military to just say, "Hey, Mr. President, we'll march anywhere in the world for you, but are you absolutely sure about this?"
Yeah, and it's gonna take somebody of that stature. It doesn't even have to be General Kane. It can be any other general. I mean, we had this, commander of Southcom resign, and the reports were that it was over illegal orders, but it's gonna take somebody not just resigning, but coming out and saying, "This is it. I resign. This and no further. My duty and loyalty are to the US Constitution. This violates it, and I can go no more." It's gonna take something like that. That would shock people and maybe make some people start paying attention, because if no one does that and we go and carry through with something in Iran, for example, and it goes south, and we all of a sudden get sucked into a war, it's too late then, because once the bullets start flying and we're literally in a war and Americans are getting blown up in the Middle East, no general's going to stand up and say anything then, I doubt. So we could have a very narrow window for somebody to do something, or we'll all pay the price for it, I fear.
Young men and women starting to vote with their feet yet? Is retention struggling in the US military, and or is recruitment struggling for the US military? And is there any obvious link between the decisions that are being made by the political leadership at the moment and recruitment retention?
No, that's why I said earlier in this episode here that originally, initially, people were behind Trump, and so they were voting with their feet at the election, even before he was sworn in, and the recruiting went on a huge spurge, and all of a sudden, where we had been struggling for a long time, all of a sudden it went really all guns going to the top, because people said, "Okay, good, finally somebody who's looking out for us," because that was his gist. And they're not going to get us into dumb war, so we don't have to worry about that. So people can start, and it did start coming back in. I don't think it's dawned on people on a broad level yet. I haven't seen any evidence that any of the recruiting is starting to start to wane. I think it would take something bad happening, or just more time to where people could go, "Wait, this guy's not for us after all." If that starts to parade across the board among the people who would be signing up for military, I haven't seen any evidence that's happened yet.
Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, you've been a brilliant guest here on Superpowers. It's time for me to have someone with your expertise and insights to just explain to us not only how the US military will feel about an incredibly busy period ahead, it looks like, but also what that means for soldiers as they reflect on the decisions that their political leaders have made, and whether or not it's the legal order, and whether or not their political leaders are in the right mental place to be making such decisions. It's an extraordinary conversation, and I've really enjoyed hearing your insight. Thank you. You've been watching Superpowers with me, James Heapy. For more episodes of Superpowers and for Frontline and the Trump Report, I think brilliant content every single week, looking at everything that's going on in the world, trying to make some sense of it where sense can be made, and otherwise just sharing in your despair. But do make sure that you subscribe to the channel to watch more Superpowers and more from my colleagues on the Trump Report and Frontline. But for now, we'll see you next week. Goodbye.